Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're digging into, well, a really eclectic mix of stories coming out of Brazil.
Quite a set, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got the Pope weighing in on family, a big soccer team possibly tangled up with organized crime.
Then there's this data theft thing targeting retirees.
Right, these Chupa-Cabras. And, to top it off, Brazil's president looking to China, of all places, for help with social media.
We've waded through quite a few news reports, some commentary as well, just trying to connect the dots.
Exactly. Our mission here is to pull out the key insights from these, seemingly separate events and figure out why they might matter to you.
It's fascinating, really. When you look at them together, these different pieces start to paint a richer picture of what's happening.
What kind of picture?
Well, you see themes emerging, don't you?
Yeah.
Like tradition versus modern shifts, big questions about institutional integrity.
The security of our information.
Exactly. And that ever-present debate about free speech online.
Okay, so let's start with the Vatican then. The Pope reportedly restated the Catholic Church's view on family, defining it as a stable union between a man and a woman.
Yes. And our sources suggest this, perhaps unsurprisingly, didn't sit well everywhere.
Right. Particularly mentioned were parts of the Brazilian media, like Globo, which some critics gave that rather unflattering nickname, Rede Escoto.
Yes, implying bias or something unsavory.
And it also apparently drew criticism from the LGBTQ plus community.
Well, from the Church's perspective, this is really a reaffirmation of long-standing doctrine. It's rooted deep in their theological tradition.
Sure, I get that, but it definitely stirred the pot. One interesting point raised was this perceived hypocrisy.
How so?
Where some prominent voices advocating for, diverse family models reportedly live quite traditional lives themselves. The classic example given was like pink for girls, blue for boys at home, but publicly pushing a very different message.
That does touch on the complexities of public versus private personas, doesn't it? But it's crucial to remember, as our sources pointed out. The Pope's statement defines the Church's concept of family. It isn't necessarily presented as a judgment on families that don't fit that specific mold.
Okay, understood. It's the official church definition. Right. Let's pivot now from the spiritual to something very, very earthly, Brazilian football.
Ah, yes, Corinthians. A massive club.
Exactly. And they're caught up in an investigation over a sponsorship deal with a betting company, Vadebet.
And the core suspicion here is, it's serious. It involves where the money might have ended up.
Which is where?
The allegation is that funds paid by Corinthians could potentially be linked back to the PCC.
The Primeiro Comuna de Capital, one of the biggest criminal organizations.
Precisely.
Okay, so how did the money allegedly move? This is where it gets a bit complex.
It seems to be. Lay it out for us.
All right. So Corinthians pays a company, Reed's Social Media Design Ltda. Now, interestingly, the owner of this company apparently worked on the current club president's election campaign.
Okay, a connection there.
Then, this company, Reed Social, allegedly pays another company, New Way Solutions. This one's flagged as a potential shell company.
Right. Just existing on paper, basically.
And then some of that money supposedly lands with a third company, UJ Football Talent Intermediación Ltda.
Oh. And that name rings a bell from our sources, doesn't it?
It does. UJ Football Talent. It was previously linked to someone suspected of being a PCC operative in the football world, a guy named Vinicius Gritzbach.
The name associated with that rather bizarre airport incident involving olives.
That's the one, the infamous olive story. So how much money are we talking about here?
The figure under scrutiny is around $1.4 million.
Okay, see, my first reaction to that was, our $1.4 million. That actually sounds surprisingly small for a scandal potentially linking a top club to the PCC.
It might seem that way initially, yeah. But even amounts that don't sound astronomical could be really significant in, say, money laundering operations.
Yes, it could be part of something bigger.
Exactly. Or a way for criminal groups to gain influence. Either way, this whole thing casts a shadow over Brazilian football's reputation. It definitely could shake fan trust.
No kidding. Okay, let's switch gears again to something with a name that sounds almost mythical. The Chupa-Cabra.
But this isn't the goat sucker legend.
No, this is the tech version. Found at the INSS, the National Social Security Institute in Brasilia.
We're talking about actual data skimming devices, hardware. These modern Chupa-Cabras were found attached to servers.
And not just one or two servers, right?
No, apparently they were found on servers across 10 floors of the building during a security sweep. Almost all of them.
Wow. And these servers are meant to be secure.
That's the worrying part. They're in rooms that supposedly require passwords for access.
So finding these devices everywhere really points towards, well, maybe an inside job, or at least a major security failure.
It screams vulnerability. Think about the data the INSS holds, sensitive personal financial info on millions of retirees.
Yeah, the reports mention stuff like details for associative discounts and those consignado loans.
Exactly, the kind of loans deducted directly from pensions. Prime targets for fraud.
And what's really, I don't know, frustrating about this is that it feels like we haven't heard much about who did it.
Right. The devices were found a while back.
You'd think there'd be security footage, some leads, but there seems to be a lack of progress or at least transparency. It's just unsettling.
It absolutely erodes public trust when things like this happen, and then there's silence. It really highlights the challenge Brazil faces in protecting critical digital infrastructure and people's data.
The potential fallout for individuals whose data gets compromised is huge.
It really is.
Okay, one last topic for today, and this one involves social media regulation, but with a rather unexpected international twist.
Yes. President Lula reportedly asking China for help.
Specifically with regulating platforms, and they mentioned TikTok by name.
The request was apparently made by Lula and the First Lady, Janja, directly to President Xi Jinping. They asked him to send over a trusted specialist.
And the reason given?
According to the reports, the concern was mainly about how right-wing groups were using TikTok and also potential harm to children.
Okay. Now, this is where, eyebrows get raised. A well-known news anchor, William Wach, had a pretty sharp take on it.
What did he say?
He pointed out the irony. Seeking advice on social media from China, given their approach to internet control. His line was something like, if regulating social media means censoring, well, then you should definitely talk to an expert like China.
It's a pointed comment, but it highlights a fundamental question, doesn't it? What does regulation actually mean in this context? China's model is heavy censorship, strict control.
Exactly. So the way I kind of read this, perhaps cynically, is maybe it's less about genuine safety regulation and more about potentially controlling narratives, silencing opposition.
It certainly raises that possibility.
Because you don't really see governments on the other side of the spectrum making similar overtures to China for this kind of help.
It really throws that classic dilemma into sharp relief. The tension between wanting to curb harmful content and protecting freedom of expression.
A tough balance for any democracy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And looking to a country with such a vastly different system for guidance on that, it definitely gives you pause.
It really makes you wonder about the implications for free speech and access to information down the line in Brazil.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. How do you think society should strike that balance between safety online and free speech?
And what does it mean when help is sought from countries with fundamentally different approaches to these freedoms?
So quite a journey today. We went from the Pope on family
to the Corinthians' sponsorship mess,
the INSS data skimmers,
and finished with this potential China collaboration on social media.
When you take all these different threads, religion, sports, data security, online speech, what bigger picture emerges for you? What does it tell us about maybe information flow, power, and just trust in institutions today?
Yeah, as you think about these stories, maybe they don't feel so unrelated after all. What questions pop up for you about tradition versus progress, about the integrity of the systems we rely on, and, well, about how we even figure out what's true anymore? Definitely some food for thought.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.